honor to be here, and truly a super thank you to Mrs. Behar, the organizing and uplifting your son's neshama, your son's soul, and just helping all of us to learn Torah and to grow. It's really very much appreciated. And a shout out to all of you to come out on a Saturday night when, people are often exhausted, they just want to head to sleep, or if you're younger, you want to head to town. But many people don't choose to come to study Torah on Saturday night. So it really is very special and a tribute to all of the Nashim Tzidkanios, the righteous women who we have here in the room with us. So the topic is Israel at war. And what I'm not going to do is talk about the atrocities, the murders, the rapes, the baby burnings. I'm going to start crying, we'll all start crying, and it's not necessarily so productive. Instead, what I'd like to do is to focus on the positive, to see if there is a way to glean some positive messages, some positive stories from what is happening in the world and what's happening specifically here in Israel, and perhaps to turn this tragedy into an opportunity. So first of all, just a moment of caution in case, since we are here in Israel, in case a missile siren goes off during the talk. So I specially installed bulletproof windows right around this glass, so the rocket-proof windows. So even though it looks like we're very vulnerable here, surrounded by glass on almost all sides, you don't have to worry. We have a special rocket-proof insulation. But just in case, as an extra precaution, in case that's not working, right down the hall is an actual shelter, and we can just walk right over there. It's a few steps away, but hopefully it will not be necessary. So I want to really utilize three different parts. Part one will be the miracles of the war. The hashgacha, the divine providence, where we literally could see Hashem's hand reaching down in front of us. Part two will be the miracles of the Jewish people, how we've responded and what we've accomplished and what we've done since the atrocities. And part three will be, what can we do now? What can we do to help? What can we do to contribute? What can we do to make a difference and to really turn this tragedy into an opportunity? We're approaching Hanukkah. Hanukkah celebrates miracles, incredible miracles that happened to the Jewish people here in Israel during the Syrian Greek time, during the Greek Empire, the miracle of the oil. And today we don't have open miracles. But what we've witnessed in Gaza and near Gaza since October 7th is nothing short of miraculous. So the first thing is I want to share, there were over 3,000 terrorists that invaded Israel on October 7th. Each one of these terrorists had a mandate. They had a mission, they had a goal, they had a quota. The minimum the minimum quota for their murder spree was at least 10 Jews. And that was the minimum. Each one had taken upon themselves a minimum to kill 10 people. That's b'di'evet. That's the minimum. To be yotzei, to fill the obligation in a minimum way. The lechatchila, mahadrin would be to kill 100 Jews. Now if we do the math, 3,000 terrorists, if each one of them succeeded in killing 10 people, that would be 30,000 dead. If each one had succeeded in their dream of killing 100 people, that would be 300,000 deaths. Now, I'm not here to minimize 1,400 deaths. Every life is a world. It's a world to that family, and it's a world to the Jewish people. But if there is a silver lining, it could have been much worse. Could have been much, much worse. And my inside military sources tell me that Iran was actually not happy with Hamas. Because Iran had a much bigger plan. Iran's plan was to have a simultaneous attack. Hamas attacking from the south, Hezbollah attacking from the north, the Houthis in Yemen sending missiles and drones, and then embedded Hamas terrorists and sympathizers already inside Israel attacking from within the country. It could have been 3 million killed. But what happened was Hamas heard about the concert. They saw over 1,000 civilians right near the border. They couldn't resist, and they jumped the gun. So in their desire to kill as many of us as possible, they actually saved hundreds of thousands of lives. Hamas had a list, detailed list and maps of different communities, of where they were going, of what they were going to do. And one of the pages they had was one of their primary targets, a list of yeshivas, of Jewish schools, and synagogues. And the day before the attack, they lost that list. And 2 major yeshivas right near the border, including in Sderot and Moshav Tifrach, which had over 1,000 young boys learning on Simchas Torah, they were completely spared because they lost the list and couldn't find the locations. There was a reserve soldier who was called up Shabbos morning, October 7th, and he gets to his unit, and they're all handed guns, and they're told, you got to head to the Gaza periphery. Right now, Hamas controls a number of kibbutzim. There are many, many hostages inside the kibbutzim, not counting the ones who were taken to Gaza, but inside Israel, there were many hostages. Please go as fast as you can and try and save them. So they, on their way there, they were quite concerned, because the guns are notorious, the ones that are given to the reserve soldiers, for not working. They always have to be cleaned. Often they have to be sent to the armory to have parts replaced. They jam, they misfire, but there was no time to do any of that. And he saw that the aiming mechanism was misaligned. He said, nothing to do, we've got to go. So they head to the border. They're all very worried that these guns are just not going to shoot properly. And they start seeing hostages and start seeing terrorists. So they have no choice. They start engaging. And one guy shoots, goes, wow, it's a perfect shot. The next guy shoots, perfect shot. And one shot after another, the guns were working perfectly. Every single year, they kept saying to each other, they couldn't believe this. Never happened before that all the guns are working for 3 days straight. They're engaging terrorists, they're saving hostages. Every gun, every shot was a perfect shot. After 3 days in the field, they go back for rest, go back to their army base, and they head to the shooting range. One guy shoots, it misfires. Next guy, the gun jams. Every gun's having a problem. They have been inspected by the armory. They said, these guns, every single internal part has to be replaced. These guns were no good from the day you got them. But somehow, for those 3 days of saving hostages, they worked perfectly. Another reserve soldier, he reports for duty. He is a religious soldier, and he shows up. He's got a secular commander right in front of him, and he says, I'm reporting for duty. Where do you want me? Where should I go? What should I do? The commander looks at him, sees he's religious. He says, what I need you to do right now, I need you to go pray. He says, no, but I've got my gun. I'm ready to serve, I'm ready to fight. What do you need? He goes, no, I need you to pray. He goes, I don't understand. Because we have 15 vehicles right now that are stuck. They're not moving. They stopped working. We don't know what's wrong with them. They are sitting ducks. If Hamas finds them, hundreds of soldiers are going to be killed. I need you to do what you do best and just go pray. So he heads to a side room and he opens up his heart. He says, God, these are your children. They're trying to save other children. Please help them. And for 15 minutes he's praying, and all of a sudden the commander comes running into the room. He gives the guy a big hug. He says, you don't know what you just did. He goes, what do you mean? Because after 1 minute of praying, one of the vehicles got free. After 5 minutes, 5 were free. After 15 minutes, the 15th vehicle just got free. He said, I am hereby appointing you to the front lines of our new prayer room. Another more recent story, the commanders were in a room and planning out their next moves in Gaza to find hostages, and another commander walks in the room. He sees everyone is in shock. Everyone, their faces are white. And he says, what's wrong? What's going on? And they point this to the screen. They had a screen of the different drones. So they point one of the screens from one of the drones, said this is the footage, and they see inside there's 3 Namer tanks were on fire. They were completely destroyed. And they said each one of these Namer tanks holds 12 soldiers. That means 36 people have been killed. That's 36 families we now have to contact and tell them that their loved ones are no longer with us. And as they're agonizing over this, what to do, how to proceed, a phone call comes in from a commander from one of the tanks. He says, how are you even calling me? How are you alive? He says, you're not going to believe what happened. I was in the first tank, and all of a sudden the rotator belt stopped working in the tank. So we all jumped out. The guys behind us saw us jump out and said, something must be wrong. So they all jumped out. The guys behind us see them jump out, and they jumped out. After the 36th guy was out, all 3 tanks were bombed, but we came out without a scratch. There's a soldier recently who was shot in the neck. The bullet hit his neck right over here, and it went through his neck and came out the other side. They rushed him, they airlifted him to the hospital. This is like serious, he maybe only has minutes to live, and the doctors were in shock. Somehow, not only did he survive, he was released from the hospital in a couple of days. Somehow the bullet missed every internal part that's important. I asked the doctors, like, he doesn't know how it's possible. It just somehow this guy, and I saw the guy, he was wearing tefillin. I don't know if he wore tefillin before it happened, but he's wearing tefillin now, and it's just unbelievable. And you can even see the wounds on the bandages on both sides of the neck, because it literally went right through. Iran announced right before Israel went into Gaza, a week after the attack, he said, Israel, don't go into Gaza. If you go into Gaza, you're going to be hit with an earthquake. A short while later, Iran was hit with an actual earthquake. You can't make this stuff up. There was a rabbi who was approached by a girl, and the girl said, I've been saving money since I was a young girl. I now have 6,000 shekels saved. I'd like to buy tzitzis for the soldiers. He says, that's beautiful, but all of your money? Maybe give part of the money, keep some for yourself. She says, no, I want to do my parts for Jewish people. Please take all 6,000 shekels. So he goes ahead, buys the tzitzis. He starts driving south. This was shortly after the attack, maybe a day or two after the attack. He's driving south, and he gets to a roadblock. And he says, sorry, you can't go any further. There's a terrorist on the loose. It's just not safe. He says, okay, so he gets out and he starts distributing tzitzis where he is to the people on this side of the roadblock. But then he's giving them all out, giving everyone there. He still has a lot more. So he goes to the commander, please, I want to go first. He can't go first. You understand, as a girl, 6,000 shekels, our savings, tzitzis, soldiers want the protection. He said, okay, you know what? You can't drive, but you can come with me in my armored vehicle, and I'll take you further. So he gets in with the commander, they drive further, they find another group of soldiers, they get out, he starts giving out tzitzis, and he sees a guy in the distance, he makes eye contact, he's about to walk towards him, the soldier's like, no, don't come any further. So he said, okay, fine. So he rolls up a pair of tzitzis, it's like a ball, and he takes it and he throws the tzitzis towards the guy. A wind comes out of nowhere, zigzag, brings tzitzis all different angles, and it lands exactly on the head of a heavily armed terrorist who's about to unleash his arsenal on all the troops nearby. He then got shot because of it, and he was caught, and the whole attack was stopped. Another reserve soldier who, he wasn't even called up, but he lived only a half-hour drive from the Gaza periphery. When he heard what happened, he ran out of his shul, and he ran straight to his car. He had a handgun with him. Said, I'll do what I can. And he heads to the border, and he starts to engage some terrorists. He saves a few people. He finds an injured soldier, brings him to the hospital. He then fights some more. He gets shot in the leg, and he ends up in a ditch with a bunch of dead terrorists, and he can't move, and he can barely talk. So now he's in this ditch, lying there, a bunch of terrorists around, and a few hours later, the IDF forces are searching the area for any terrorists. Anyone armed and moving is going to be shot. And they approach this ditch, and they see a bunch of terrorists all lying down. They're all dead, except they see one terrorist, really this guy, who came to help. He's moving, and he has a gun. So they're about to unload on him, and one says, wait! Tzitzis. He was wearing tzitzis, and that saved him, and they brought him to the hospital, and he recovered. And it's not just Sitch that protects. Another guy recently was shot, and he had a small pocket Tehillim, a Psalms book with him. The bullet got lodged inside the Tehillim. It didn't even break the Tehillim. It looks like the Tehillim was intact. Somehow, like the binding caught it. The Tehillim's fine, he's fine, and the bullet is no longer fine. So a woman and her 2 daughters who were taken captive and being brought to Gaza, as they approach the Gaza fence, the woman says, just pours her heart on and says, look, God, I haven't been the best Jew. I really haven't been connected to Torah. And I'm really not the most modest of people. But if we survive this, I take it upon myself, my daughters, we will dress modestly, we'll become modest, we'll learn what it means to be a Jew. Please help us. The terrorists who were escorting them all of a sudden just started walking into Gaza and left them. And they came right back to Israel. Very recently, there's a lot of fighting on the northern border also. So there was an army base very close to the border that kept getting shot at. It's just too close to Lebanon to just take chances. They decided we're going to move the base. We're going to move the base further south so it's not literally right there in firing range. So they decided at 11 a.m., that's when we're going to move the base. But that morning, it was unusually rainy, pouring really, really hard. And they said, we're not going to wait. Let's just move it now. So they start moving it, moving. They finished at around 11 o'clock. They finally all have left the base. And at that time, Hezbollah unleashes a huge arsenal on what was the base, destroyed the whole area. But everyone survived because of this Gishmei Bracha, this blessing, this rain of blessing that just forced them to move a little bit earlier. When the soldiers eat in the field, it's not an easy task. I mean, the person obviously they're not given lavish meals, but also they have to eat being ready. So one of the rules for eating is they keep their gun in their hand and their hand on the trigger. So you've got one hand with your gun on the trigger and the other hand you're eating with. So they're sitting like that, and one of the guys accidentally hits the firing thing. Maybe he heard I'm not sure what caused, but he shoots. And all of a sudden they hear a scream. So everyone jumps up, grabs their guns, look what's happening, and they find a terrorist who's about to attack them. He's now shot. Somehow the gun just went off and went just to the right spot to get that guy. There were another group of soldiers recently. They were sitting and eating. And one of the things they're often given is tuna. They get a can of tuna with oil. It sounds like some of you heard the story. So they get a can of tuna with oil, and not the most exciting meal, especially if you get it day after day after day after day. But what soldiers typically do is they put a match around it in the oil. They burn it up. They basically cook the tuna, and it's much tastier that way. But when you're at war, you don't do that. Right? You don't want to bring attention to yourself. You don't want to do that with explosives nearby. But one of the soldiers was just so accustomed to doing that. He took out his match, he lights it up, it's on fire now, and the guy's like, are you crazy? They have explosives right here, the whole thing could explode. He's like, oh no, he throws it as far as he can, and all of a sudden they hear a huge explosion. Everyone jumps up, guns ready, they go looking, and they see a white flag, and a few Hamas terrorists come out of a tunnel. The tuna happened to land just at the hidden opening, the hidden hole in the ground, lands right there, lands on their explosives, blows up, and then only whoever's left comes out alive, but they're surrendering and saving perhaps 30 or 40 lives. There are many more stories, but I want to talk a little bit about some of the Shabbos stories, because there's some incredible stories about the power of Shabbos, the power of the Sabbath. There was a girl who started keeping Shabbos just a few weeks before the attack, but she loves concerts, and she was especially excited about this peace concert. And she called up the promoters and said, please, can you push it off one day later just so I could attend? This means so much to me. She explains the Shabbos thing. I don't know if they knew about Shabbos or not, but they basically said, no, we can't push it off. We've organized it already, take it or leave it. So she was very disappointed. She was stuck staying at home and missing out on the action until she found out what the action actually was. There was Netivot is a community, a large community near the border, mostly religious, and they don't have any gates, they don't have any protection. It could have been a massacre. in Netivot. But when the terrorists who were assigned to Netivot came, they saw some sort of billboard with the Baba Sali, with the rabbi used to live in Netivot. They said it just got spooked for some reason. They moved on and they didn't attack. Moshav Yachini is a mixed religious secular moshav right near the border. And they had disputes for a long time, would close the gate on Shabbos or don't close the gate for Shabbos. As you can imagine, the religious-oriented people wanted the gate closed, not to have traffic coming in on Shabbos, and the second people wanted freedom of movement and didn't want it closed. So it was never closed. The first time it was closed was October 7th, because I guess maybe the combination of Shabbos and Simchas Torah, the second people agree, for this one time we agree we could close the gate. And it was a hard, strong, sturdy gate. When the terrorists got to the gate, they were trying to get through, trying to open the explosives. It wasn't working, and they said it's too much time. They moved on. The whole moshav was saved. My guess is they're now closing it every Shabbos. There was a family that became Shomer Shabbos about 6 months before the attack. They lived on one of the kibbutzim, completely secular kibbutz, and they were the only ones on the kibbutz that observed the Sabbath. And it's very hard to keep Shabbos by yourself. It's lonely. So what they did was every single weekend they went away to a different community, to a different family, to experience Shabbos in all its glory and all its beauty until October 7th. The wife, the mother of the family, was 9 months pregnant at that point. So it's too hard to travel. Decided to stay home. And not only did they stay home, they invited guests to stay with them. So now they're there. October 7th, Shabbos morning comes, they hear the gunshots, they hear the screaming, and they realize it's only a matter of time. But for some unknown reason, the terrorists never came to their home. They saw them out the window. They just walked right by. And they only found out afterwards the terrorists had a detailed map of every community, including a listing of each house, how many people lived in the house. So they would know, there's a 5-year-old hiding in the closet, don't leave yet, we got to find the 5-year-old. So they knew every house. The map that they had said, this house, don't bother going, they go away every weekend. There was another family where the only people, different kibbutz, where the only people home was a mother and her children, and she heard the terrorists outside, so she gave each of her children a knife and said, listen, we'll just do what we can. And then she speaks to Hashem, speaks to God, says, look, never kept Shabbos before, but if we get out of this alive, take it upon myself and my family, we're all going to keep Shabbos from now on. And the terrorists skipped her house. There are actually 10 people at the concert who, as you can imagine, were not Sabbath observant. This concert took place on Shabbos. And the 10 of them, when they saw what was happening, they made a pact amongst themselves. If we get out of this alive, we're going to keep Shabbos from now on. All 10 of them survived. I want to give a little disclaimer here. I'm not trying to imply that if you observe Shabbos, you can't be killed. And if you don't observe Shabbos, then you're going to die. Obviously, that's not the case. But there's a power to it. Just like in the physical world, a person, they eat healthy, and have a healthy lifestyle, it could help them to live a longer life. And if someone smokes all day and drinks all day, it could hurt their ability at living a longer life. But they're not guaranteed. You can have a very healthy person who dies young, and a person who's very unhealthy who has a long life. It can still happen. There are powers in the spiritual world. Every mitzvah, every commandment has a power to it. So for example, kosher, eating kosher food has a spiritual power of strengthening our midos, of strengthening our character traits, becoming less lazy, become more caring, more sharing, more tolerant, less angry. Kosher food gives us that spiritual power, that spiritual energy. Shabbos gives the spiritual power of protection. It helps to protect us. It helps to shield us from harm. It's not a guarantee, but it's an extra step, an extra cushion, like an extra spiritual bulletproof vest to go around us. All right, I want to segue into the miracle of the Jewish people. This is perhaps the first war in the history of the world where more people ran towards the country being attacked than running away from the country being attacked. My son's unit, for example, they were not called up. My son is the Chetz, Haredi Tzanchanim, religious paratroopers. They were not called up, and they every single guy in the unit contacted the commander, please, we want to go, we want to help. They said, okay, that's beautiful, that's great, but we don't have enough equipment. We don't have enough bulletproof vests. We don't have enough guns. So my son and his friends raised the money to get the supplies so they could go and help. My nephew, who was called up, he's in Givati, and they're seeing a lot of action right now. He was just married a few months ago, and his wife is now pregnant. Now imagine you're that woman. Your new husband is taken off for war. You're pregnant, and you don't know if you're ever going to see him again. So you might think such a person is going to be crying all day and be miserable. What's she doing? She's spending her time arranging meals for people from the south who have been dislocated to make sure everyone has a place to stay, a place to eat. She single-handedly baked 300 challahs for just one Shabbos to help families from the south. A friend of mine was contacted the week after the attack and told, can you host a family for Shabbos from the south? And he said, let me check with my wife. He calls back 45 minutes later. He says, we could do it. We're happy to host a family. She said, sorry, you're too late. He goes, when you were too late? He said, everyone's hosted. He said, how many people needed to be hosted? 6,000 families. 6,000 families found places to stay at complete strangers' homes for Shabbos in less than 45 minutes. Mi ka'amcha Yisrael. Who is like the Jewish people? Even children are getting into the action. In Jerusalem, there were children who were selling cotton candy, and instead of paying for it with money, you pay for it by saying a bracha, by making a tefillah, saying a prayer for someone who's missing. In Lakewood, they were selling popcorn, and there the fee was saying a parak of Tehillim, saying a chapter of Psalms. The whole community, the whole country, the whole nation, all around the world coming together. You have non-kosher restaurants in Tel Aviv that made themselves kosher in order to bring food to the soldiers that everyone will be able to eat, whether they're religious, not religious, that everyone can be comfortable eating their food. There was a woman who was called up to reserves, a religious female soldier, and as she's being called up, her friend says to, look, I know it may not seem like the time for this, but you've been looking for a shidduch for a long time. You've been looking for your soulmate unsuccessfully. You're about to see a lot of nice boys. Some of them are religious. Maybe now's a chance, just like keep an eye out during the training. Obviously not when you're fighting, but during the training, maybe during some of the lectures, keep your eye out that maybe you'll see a guy who could be a potential match. All right, good idea. I'll look out for the religious soldiers and keep my eyes out. So after a couple of days, she speaks to her friend, says, your plan's not going to work. Because why not? So I don't know who's religious. Why don't you know who's religious? It's because every single soldier is wearing a yarmulke and tzitzis. All of a sudden, they all believe in Hashem. It's unbelievable. There was someone from Israel whose mother passed away in America, and he had to fly back to America right after the Hamas attack. He didn't have a ticket. As you may recall, most flights were canceled. One of the only airlines flying was El Al, and they had waiting lists. So he said, I'll go to the airport, it's my mother's funeral, I'll do what I can. He goes to the airport, and he gets online, he gets to the front of the line, says, any chance you have a spare seat for me? My mother passed away. He says, sorry, there's no way, we don't have any seats. Guy next to him checking in, he's handing his luggage, he goes, take my seat. Hands him his ticket, and he gets back home. I met several people in my travels to the U.S. And I'll tell you, when I spoke on U.S. campuses, usually when I go on a speaking tour, we try to promote it. You want to get as many people to show up as possible, social media and all different methods to get the word out. I'm coming, you got to come hear me, it's going to be great, and people talking it up. Get Mrs. Bayer come and do a whole nice introduction. And this time, the flyers did not even say where the events were taking place. The flyers just had a phone number. You had to call, speak to someone only if the people organizing could vouch for the person. We know that person, they're okay. Here's where it's happening. Shh, don't tell anyone. That's how you give out the address. Crazy. But one thing that was beautiful was as I met people on different campuses, mostly secular Jews, almost everywhere I went, people said to me that ever since October 7th, they've been getting closer to Judaism. Some are saying blessings now. Some girls are lighting Shabbos candles now. I met one guy who has an appliance store, and Shabbos is his busiest day, best day of the week. He said since October 7th, they put a sign on his store. The store is closed on Shabbos. There was another guy whose son was killed on October 7th, and he was flying from America to Israel. And he's, very distraught. He's on the plane. He's thinking, what can I do for my son? What can I do le'ilu nishmaso, in merit of his soul? And he's looking around. He sees the plane is mostly secular people. Figures there are probably a lot of reserve soldiers coming back, wanting to help. He says, what if I would offer my tefillin to one of them? Now, he was a little nervous because he's not the kind of guy to go around giving out tefillin to people. But he thought, maybe for his son, he'd make the effort. And just, he doesn't want to impose on people, but maybe the guy next to him maybe would agree. So he offers the tefillin to the guy sitting next to him. And the guy says, absolutely, I'm happy to do it. The guy behind him hears going on and says, can I put on the tefillin after him? Sure. The guy behind him says, oh, I'm after him. And pretty soon, a line forms in the aisle, starts going down the aisle and around again. And a few minutes later, an announcement comes over the loudspeaker. This is your pilot speaking. I'm going to be handing over the plane to my co-pilot so I can go back and put on tefillin for a complete stranger. Okay, where can we go from here? One thing that's clear about what happened is this is not derech hateva. This is not normal. This is not natural. I don't just mean the behavior of the terrorists. I mean the fact that it even was able to occur. You have the CIA, you have the Mossad, two of the best intelligence agencies in the world, and they somehow couldn't catch something being planned for over 2 years of planning. And it seems clear to me and many of the big rabbis up there that Hashem has put blinders. He literally put blinders on decision makers that we could not see this coming. Why, we don't know. But that's what we're going to try and figure out. What can we do about it? We never know the why. But what? What can we do about it? How can we turn this tragedy into an opportunity? So there are many different messages being shared by some of the leading rabbis. Again, I'm not one of them, so I'll just share what some of them are saying, and perhaps we can elevate ourselves through this process. So the first thing is the idea of ben am l'chavero, of loving our family, loving our fellow Jews, loving other people. I probably don't have to tell you that right before October 7th, the hatred, the sinna that existed among Jews. I mean, if you go back and look at some of those videos from beforehand, so much judgment of other people, so much fighting, and there's been a huge change since then. Where all of a sudden it no longer matters if you're religious or not, if you're Ashkenaz or Sephardi, if you're Hasidic or secular. All of a sudden we've begun to remember that we're supposed to be one family. We are one family, but we're finally starting to act like we're one family.
Maybe we acted like this before, just like setting something's right.
So perhaps one message is that we need to work on that. That we need to work on how we treat other people. And I would say probably the two most important areas to work on that for, number one, the people that we don't get along with, the people who maybe we look down upon or we have a hard time with. Maybe those are the people we should start putting our efforts into being nice. But also, I would add maybe the people closest to us, because sometimes our immediate family and the ones who are nearest and dearest are the ones who get the brunt of things we shouldn't have said, or pain, or hurt feelings, or misunderstandings. So that's idea number one, to work on how we treat other people. Idea number two is the power of prayer. Our Father in heaven is the doctor of all doctors. He's the general. of all generals. I heard recently from Reb Simcha Zissel of Kelman, his name, that you may have heard the idea of Bishvil li nivra ha'olam, that the world was created for me, that each one of us, it would be worth it to create the world for us. But he says much more. He says it would be worth it for Hashem, for God, to create the entire world, every solar system, every galaxy, the entire universe, just for one person to say one blessing of Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo, just to say, blessed be God and blessed be His name. It would be worth it, the entire creation, just for that one person to make that blessing. And then he said, saying Amen is 1,000 times more powerful than saying Baruch Hu Baruch Shemo. And then he said, one Amen Yehesh Me Rabbah is 1,000 times more powerful than one Amen. And now imagine if you're doing actual full prayers, then you're doing it every day. I mean, unbelievable. And God speaks all languages. Doesn't matter where you're located. Doesn't have to be in the synagogue specifically. God could hear us at home. God could hear you in America, in Jerusalem, in Russia, in Iowa, wherever you are. But let's open up our hearts. But don't just say the words. Feel them. Know that we're talking to someone, to a God in heaven who could hear us, and He could do something about it. Number 3 is Shabbos. I spoke earlier about the power of Shabbos, the protective energy. Rav Zilberstein recently said that the more we protect and guard Shabbos, the more Shabbos will protect and guard us. He told a story about the Chafetz Chaim, that a father went to the Chafetz Chaim and he said, my wife is in labor. The doctor said things look really badly. There's nothing they could do. I don't think she's going to survive. Can you do something? I said, look, I can't do anything, but find me someone who is moser nefesh for Shabbos. Find me someone who sacrificed for Shabbos. So they look around, they find a guy who had been struggling for a long time about thinking, should I close my store or not close? And he was always breaking Shabbos. And finally, just recently, he closed his store on Shabbos, a great financial risk. Chafetz Chaim asked the guy, are you willing to give the spiritual merit of your mitzvah for Shabbos, of your sacrifice? Are you willing to give it to this guy's wife? He said, absolutely. The Chafetz Chaim says to the guy, you have nothing to worry about. Your wife will be fine. You can go home. And sure enough, his wife was fine. The baby was fine. Everyone was healthy. The power of Shabbos. And so for someone who's not yet observing Shabbos, so great, maybe they could try to observe it, maybe partly observe it, maybe do something, maybe while they're driving in a car on Shabbos, not to put music on. There's all different ways. It's not all or nothing. A person could try to connect in a way that's meaningful for them. And for those of us that are already keeping Shabbos, you might say, well, what can I do? We all have room for improvement. Maybe we could add on to Shabbos beforehand, so we're not rushing into Shabbos the last second. Oh, now it's Jerusalem candlelight time. Now it's the other 8th candlelight time. Oh, now it's Shkia. Now it's sunset. Oh, now it's after sunset. Oh, look at that. I'm almost ready. Maybe we could be a little more in advance. Or maybe when Shabbos is ending, we don't have to rush out. Everyone has rushed to, unless you're coming to a class over here, of course. But under normal circumstances, perhaps we could extend it a little longer. Or maybe we could spend more time singing at the Shabbos meal, maybe more time studying Torah. Maybe we could be extra careful in how we treat other people on Shabbos, to be kinder, to be more tolerant, to be less judgmental. We all have room for improvement. Let's see what we could do, not just to elevate our Shabbos, but to sacrifice for Shabbos, to make Shabbos a bigger priority than it currently is. The next thing is the power of Torah. Rav Steinman spoke about this, and Rav Usher Weiss said, one person learning Torah is the equivalent of 1,000 people. It's like puts a protective shield on 1,000 soldiers. One person learning Torah can protect 1,000 people on the front. So I was thinking, how does that even work? But Rav Simcha Zissel, I mentioned before, so remember he said that Amen is 100 times as powerful as Baruch Baruch Shemo, and Amen Yehesh Me Rabbah is 100 times more powerful than Amen. He said learning one word of Torah is 100 times more powerful than Menya Heshmei Rabbah. Which means one word of Torah is 1,000,000,000 times more powerful than the Baruch Shemo, which is worth to make the entire world just for one person to do that. What a power. Now if you're thinking, well, how does that work practically? So I heard an unbelievable story. There was a guy that went to visit his friend in the hospital, a yeshiva guy, visits his friend, another yeshiva guy who's hurt, and next to him in the same room is an injured soldier. When he goes to visit his friend, at some point the soldier says, why aren't you helping? Why aren't you guys helping with the war effort? You are studying Torah. Look at me. I'm sacrificing for the Jewish people. What are you doing? So the guy says, well, actually, I'm helping also. He says, really? How are you helping? He says, well, I learned Torah, and I actually signed up to have a soldier. Each one of us, we have a soldier's name that when we learn Torah, we have in mind that this specific soldier should be safe, should be protected. He said, really? He's a little skeptical. What's the name of your soldier? And he says the name, I don't remember what I say, it was Shimon ben Reuven Yisachar. He says, that's my name. He goes, what? Really? And turns out, this soldier was matched with this yeshiva boy. So now it's a little less hostile. They're talking a little bit, but then the soldier says, okay, in a non-condescending way, but, first of all, I appreciate what you're doing, but clearly it's not working. I got injured. So the yeshiva guy says, well, God works in mysterious ways. Maybe it would have been worse. Maybe you would have been killed. I don't know. But, so fine. So they go on talking. And as they're talking, he asked the yeshiva guy about his schedule. He explains he learns in the morning. Then he takes a break, at lunch break. And then he goes back to start learning at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He says, and they say, but last Tuesday, I didn't go back 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I didn't come till 4 o'clock due to a delay. And the soldier can't believe it. He's thinking shock. What's wrong? He says, I got injured exactly from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock last Wednesday. And they realized it was exactly the time. And the soldier said, I guess I didn't have your spiritual protection at that time when you're used to studying Torah. This is not a joke. These things really work. All of us could contribute. Each one of us. What we're doing right now. We have, we have 50 people in the room. That's, what did I say, thousands? That's 50,000. 50,000 people we're protecting. 50,000 people we're protecting right now. Unbelievable. Each one of us could do it in our own rooms, in our own homes, anytime, day or night. So I heard all these ideas, prayer, loving other people, Shabbos, Torah. I approached Diane Solomon. I said, which one do I do? I do all the above. It's something else. I'm looking for just a clear directive. Tell me this is what I got to do, and I'm good. And he said to me, look, it's clear that Hashem, that our Father in heaven, has written us a letter. He has sent us one letter to the Jewish people as a nation. He's sent us each personalized, customized letters for me, for you and me. And my personalized letter might be different than your personalized letter. Each one of us has a unique letter just for me about what I need to do. But he said, normally, I know as an educator in the outreach world, normally when I'm talking to someone about Jewish growth, we talk about one small step at a time. One small step, little by little. But he said, this is different. This was a huge message. And therefore we need a big step. That each one of us needs to look inside ourselves, to look at the mirror and say, what big thing can I do? What big change can I make? We all have room for improvement. What's something that I could do that I particularly weekend, or I could be much stronger, I could do much better, and let me do that to help contribute. And I'll share one final story. There were two shuls, two synagogues that were right next to each other, and they were having a dispute. They were fighting over the land in between the synagogues. There was land, there were property, that was unclear who owned that land. Each one had plans, expansion plans, what to do with that land. And the dispute got vicious and spiteful and hateful, which is doubly sad because a synagogue is supposed to be a place of spirituality, a place of prayer, a place of growth, a place of love, and it turned into hostility. So they decided we'll go to a Jewish court to hopefully resolve the problem, maybe even help bring peace. They go to the Jewish court analyzes the situation, they ask each one what you wanted to do with the land, what would you do, and they said, based on our research, it seems to us that synagogue A is entitled to 90% of the land, and synagogue B is entitled to 10% of the land. But we know how much hate there is right now, animosity, and simply dividing it like that is not going to make the problem go away. We want to ask synagogue A if in the interest of peace, they are willing to accept 60% of the land, knowing they're entitled to 90, and give 40% to synagogue B. And it seems, based on your plans, that 60% is enough for synagogue A to do their plans, 40% is enough for synagogue B. Do you accept this offer? And the people from synagogue A said, absolutely yes. For peace, we will do it. And the parties embraced. All of a sudden, the hate turned to love. 2 weeks later, a Hamas rocket landed on the disputed land. The synagogues were packed, and the rocket failed to explode. The power of peace. My friends, we are all soldiers in Hashem's army. We all have a mission to do in God's army. It's personalized. My mission's not the same as yours, and yours not the same as hers, but each of us have what we can do. But we give us a bracha, give us a blessing, that if each of us steps up and does our part to become the best me that I could be, to do my part as a Jewish soldier, that not only will all the hostages come home safely, but we will all be reunited with our loved ones with the coming of Mashiach, the coming of the Messiah, B'mehera v'yameinu. Amen.
Thank you so much. Great.